This is the weather. So welcome to autumn. Now the weather has been absolutely atrocious over the last few weeks. It's been incredibly wet, incredibly windy, and I'm very behind with all the jobs that I could do with doing on the plot at this time of year. Now a lot of people think that this time of year it's the end of anything that you need to do on your veg patch or plot, allotment, whatever you are that you're growing. But there's still an awful lot of jobs to do. One of the jobs to do is to clear all your old plants, anything that's not going to produce anything more, that won't survive the winter and you no longer need. Now I like to try and keep in the root system. But all this waste is perfect for your compost bin, which, as many of you already know, I'm quite passionate about my compost bins. And there's always a lot more stuff to go in there at this time of year than what you actually realise or think. So that's one of the jobs that you need to do. Another one of those jobs is collecting your leaves. Now, there is loads of areas by me which I can go and collect leaves. I live in quite a semi-rural area, but luckily I have a local park quite close to me which I can collect the leaves just underneath the tree line, which is less issues with any dog mess or anything else. Leaves are a great addition to your allotment, and they're a great amount of benefit to your compost system, or using as a mulch, or making that great asset leaf mould, which does take a couple of years, but it's a fantastic medium to add to your compost or your potting mix. One of the other great things about this time of year as well, you'll probably be able to get an awful lot of wood chip. Now we've had several deliveries, and this is great as a mulch, either for your paths or the tops of your beds. Just don't dig it in, not unless it's really rotted after a couple of years. Now you can treat wood chip either as a fresh mulch over on top, or you can let it sit in that pile for a couple of years. It's completely up to you how you use wood chip, but again, don't forget these free natural resources that you might be able to get delivered straight to your plot. Now another great way is to create more growing areas or to amend your soil. Now this is one of the no-dig beds I've just created last week or the last couple of weeks, and this is all fresh homegrown compost that we've managed to create this year. Now it's still quite lumpy, but this will all break down beautifully over the winter months, so getting it on now is just about perfect. Doing your no-dig beds now, it's that great opportunity to be able to stand back and actually see pretty much a blank canvas. You don't have to do it all in one go. Create just one or maybe two beds, anything that you can do with the compost that you've already got. You don't have to go out and spend mega money on compost to create these no-dig beds. Start small and dream big. You'll get there in the end. Now, if you're not doing no-dig and you are digging your soil, which there's nothing wrong with if that's what you want to do. Gardening should be about anything that you want to do, obviously legally. This area is the plot that we took on late this year. Now we did grow some bits and pieces in there, but really nutrient-wise, it's quite poor here. It's very heavy clay underneath a very small amount of topsoil, and it really does pull with water. At the moment, we've covered it with black plastic. Now, I'm not an advocate of using plastic or coverings or anything else, but for us at the moment, it's what's helped us keep under control this area. Now, this area, when we took it on, it was full of annual weeds, plus the perennials, docks, dandelions, nettles, loads of extra comfrey, everything you could think of was in this side of the plot. Now we have a massive amount of mare's tail on this plot here, which we're just trying to dig out as and when we see, but I actually have fallen behind a little bit. But for the moment, this is covered with plastic. Now, I don't really necessarily like to do this long term, even though you can grow your plants, especially squashes, pumpkins, anything like that, actually directly through the plastic by making that hole. And we did do that later on in this season to do this section, just to get something growing in this area. But at the moment, the plastic's on there to keep all these weed seeds down. So when I'm ready to do the beds, be it dig or no dig, I've got more of a clean slate. This was where our potatoes were this year, and we all know how that worked out. I don't think we're going to do potatoes next year, but you never know. But at least I'll have an area where I can work that's clean from weeds, or very little digging to remove those weeds, to start to plant for next year. Now, this time of year, it is the perfect time to add your manures or your mulches to your ground area. Now, if you're lucky enough to be able to get a load of free manure, that's fantastic, that's great. That's what you want to use. Now, be it horse manure or cow manure, with shavings, with straw, with anything like that, you have to be careful where you're getting your manures from. There is certain chemicals that they can be used on the paddocks, what passes through the animals harmlessly, but then is actually put into the manure or the air, that kind of area. This will really damage any new plantings that you put into the ground, if not kill them. So choose wisely for your manure. But if you can get a good load or a few bags at a time of manure, it's a great addition to your allotment. Now, we've got to go and get some more eventually over the next 3 or 4 weeks, because I want to start removing this plastic bit by bit and start adding and mulching the ground with a heavy dose of manure. I think the plants on this area this year were quite lacking, and I think that really heavy, rich of free organic matter will really help this area to thrive next year. Also, you can dig straight into trenches, just like I've done here. Using the trench method by burying your scraps, your leaves, your straw, anything that's going to decompose naturally straight into the ground in an area where you want to plant for next year. But you do have to plan ahead in places where you know you're going to plant. And that's why we've made a start in our top area for our bean row. This will be for all our beans, pulses, things like that, well, some of them anyway. And I'm going to try the trench method for the first time this year. Making compost directly onto your bed by using a thick mulch of either leaves or scraps or anything like that is also another great way to go and dig into your soil. This will all rot down and give your soil a really good feed. But just be warned, if you do compost directly onto your area in a large area, your local wildlife might take a liking to it and start digging through it or leaving their little messes behind. Another great thing to do at this time of year is to take cuttings. There is a lot of things that you're probably growing or want to grow that you can take cuttings from. These are blackcurrant bushes. I've also got red currant, white currant, pink, and I want to take cuttings off all of them because I'm finding that I want to move into more fruits and vegetables that I don't have to keep resowing each year, and things that I know I can make a lot of products from. So I'll be taking cuttings off of these very, very soon to extend my currant production. Another one of the cuttings I'll be taking is my blueberry bushes. Now, I love blueberries and I do really, really, really want to grow a lot more blueberry bushes. Now, at the moment, I've got them in pots, and if you watched a previous video, you would have seen foxes destroying several of them. But I'm hoping to take some really good cuttings this year so I can expand my blueberry season. Now, we've come into the polytunnel because it's decided to absolutely pour it down outside. But there's other jobs that I need to do in here as well. You remember we had this absolutely chock-a-block full of tomatoes and chilies. Now I have cut all the chili plants and the tomato plants down, but I've left the actual stalks in the soil. I've got some remnants of basil plants and some old marigolds, things like that, which all really could do with being removed. Prepping the polytunnel for either carrying on growing or for next year's growing season. Again, by topping up with either manure or compost or whatever it is that you're going to be using this year. It's a great time to do this, to give it over these winter months to settle down, ready for growing next year. Now I have planted some coriander in here that is actually doing really, really well. But other than that, I'm actually not growing anything else through the winter in this polytunnel this year. I've got so much going on this year through the whole of the winter months into the early spring. I just haven't had time to actually plant up anything really for the polytunnel. But if you've got something outside that can tolerate cold weather, but not necessarily a really heavy frost, you can always dig it up and plant it here in your polytunnel or your greenhouse. This may give it a little bit longer on its harvest time. But getting on top of your polytunnel now will really benefit you at the start of your growing season next year. Even washing your polytunnel with a little bit of soapy water will really help keep all that algae from growing on the outside, which will stop that really important light entering your polytunnel, which at this time of year, especially if you're growing, will really have a massive effect on how much light your plants will actually receive. So that, again, is on a to-do list. Now, it's not just about removing plants, it's also about taking care of your frost-tolerant plants, like your brassicas or your onions or anything like that. Now, when it comes to, say with this kale, you need to make sure that you're removing all these yellow leaves. They're not going to produce anything or give any benefit to the plant now. And it will only introduce areas for slugs and snails. Slugs and snails love rotting material. So clearing your areas of this is a great way to help reduce those slugs and snail pest damage. And again, this can either be buried into your ground to rot away naturally or added to your compost bay. Another great thing to do this time of year is to separate your strawberries. Now, most strawberries, if not all, will create runners, giving you free strawberries to replant. And there's lots of other things that you can do this with too. There's herbs that you can probably split, like your mint. There's lots of things that you can do this with, where you can split or propagate from the actual original plant. I like to split my mint and plant it into other pots once it gets a bit too big, giving me even more to use for next year. Now, all these strawberry plants that are here are going to be moved because this area is just far too wet, being at the bottom of the slope that we are on. But it's on my to-do list. But at this time of year and all the way through winter, it's the perfect time to replant those strawberries. I've also got some thyme shrubs here. Now, they've done okay here, but I did lose all my rosemary that was here and a few other little things that I had in the herb section. Again, it's just too wet. So this time of year, before it gets really, really cold, I'm going to dig up these herbs and put them elsewhere. Somewhere that's got a little bit more free draining. They're Mediterranean plants, so they don't like to be waterlogged. So again, that's another job that you can do at this time of year, is move some of your herbs or some of your plants around your allotment. This time of year, you can really gain a lot of inspiration by just standing and looking and deciding what you want to do new for next year. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can reuse or multiply what you already have. It's just having a little bit of forward thinking and taking those cuttings or dividing those plants at the right time of year. Also, at this time of year, there's certain plantings you can still do. Now, broad beans, favia beans, field beans, they can all go out now if you want to. They don't always survive a really cold winter, but sometimes they do, and you'll get a really good crop really early in the season for next year. We don't plant ours until the early spring, very late winter. There's also your garlic. Now you've still got time to plant your garlic. We can plant ours up till December sometimes, depending on how late. Now we're still undecided whether we're going to grow any garlic or onions this year or next year. So we actually haven't planted any. We had such a massive impact with allium leaf miner this year, and we haven't been able to get the really fine mesh to be able to protect them from the allium root fly. Now, because you've been cleaning up and you've been following the jobs of what needs to be done, you'll end up with an awful lot of things on your compost heap. Now, it could be brown material, it could be green material. You'll probably get less grass cuttings at this time of year, especially in our climate at the moment where it's just been too wet to mow that lawn. But remember to keep filling your compost bays and keep them as active as possible. Once you've got to a good amount, keep them covered, keep them aerated, and that will be ready for you for next year. So that's just some of the jobs I'm trying to keep up with at the moment. But what are you guys doing at this time of year? Have you stopped working on your plots, covered everything over if that's what you do, and are just now reading seed catalogues? Or are you still really active with your growing and your preparation of your plot? Let me know in the comments, guys, what you're doing at this time of year. I always love to hear all the different things people like to do on their plots and whether they've had a really good success story with those. So that's it for today. As you can see, I've got an awful lot of jobs to do, and I had better get stuck in before it starts raining again.